hearing room of the 10th floor of City Council. That sounds nice. He'll second the motion.
Second.
Mr. Bruce Guy, the great councilor of the 15th District is here. My name is Tom LaBonge. Honored to serve both of us, the City of Los Angeles. And I would ask the legislative analyst to please tell us what's before us.
Item number 1 is a contract with the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board for marketing and tourism services.
Good morning.
Good morning. Marla Blevins, Assistant General Manager with the Convention and Tourism Development Department. What's before you today is a contract with LA Tourism to market the convention center and also the City of Los Angeles as a tourist destination. It's a 5.5-year contract. Funding for the contract comes from 1 percentage point of the 14% transient occupancy tax, and the contract would expire in 2020. And the 4 primary objectives of the contract are to increase visitation to the City of Los Angeles as both a convention and tourist destination, to measure the economic impact from citywide conventions in the tourism sector as a whole, to increase and track visitor engagement, and to ensure that the city is getting the best use of its funding from this contract. I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
You have a question or two?
Yeah, if I can bring up Patty from the
Madam Janet,
the LA Tourism Convention
number 1
Board.
person in the number 2 role.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the city staff for the presentation and report. I appreciate it. Patty, we had an opportunity not too long ago to join Mayor Garcetti in the trade mission, but also, most importantly, sign some MOUs regarding tourism, especially with the medical tourism. And I saw firsthand, and I was really impressed with the presence that the LA Tourism Convention Board has in Asia. I know you have bodies on the ground there promoting Los Angeles. Can you share a little bit about what we learned in our recent trip there and how staff on the ground in Asia is going to impact our tourism dollars here in Los Angeles?
Yes, I'd be happy to. My name is Patty McJennett with Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board. You are right, we have a very strong presence that we're quite proud of in China particularly. We have an office in Beijing. We opened an office last year in Shanghai, and then we've had for some years an office in Seoul and in Tokyo. We are particularly excited about the medical travel initiative because we do think there's a lot of potential to be able, in working with the LAEDC, we had 5 of the major hospitals in LA, and it's a big initiative. It's gotten a lot of press while we were there, and since then we've had a lot of follow-up from the tour operators, and other airlines as well have expressed interest in jumping on that. But China in general is now the number 1 overseas market for LA, surpassing UK and Australia. So Canada and Mexico are still larger, but certainly that is a huge growth potential for LA.
Well, you measure, Mr. Chair, this contract based on their successes on LATCB, and if you look at tourism being the number 1 industry in the city of Los Angeles, you guys are doing a fine job, so I approve and ask that we move forward. And I like the fact that we extended the terms from 3 to 5.5 years, so I'll ask approval on the item.
Thank you very much. 2 things. One, 8 years ago, my wife had surgery up at and fought cancer, stage 4 cancer, beat it. And in the moments before, as I said strong thoughts to my wife, I ran into a neighbor their husband was getting treatment. And then I ran into someone from East Coast, someone from Europe, someone from the Mideast. Mm-hmm. And I don't like to call it medical tourism, but I think if you could think of a better way, because it's not tourism, it's very serious, but I think of all the points of light that Los Angeles has, whether it's at St. John's, whether it's at Norris, whether it's at USC Medical Center, wherever, UCLA, this is very important, and there's a positive plus to all of that. So if you could just think of a better word, because...
Well, we've gravitated towards medical travel, just to begin
medical
with.
Travel.
And kind of the brand name, if you will, that we were using on the trip to introduce it is Discover Los Angeles care.
Yeah,
think
good.
it's
So
what-
that's good. Very good. And the other thing, too, we will know in the next 60 days, I think, whether or not 2024 would be in our opportunities for the Olympic Games, if we're the committee. All I was just thinking, if we believe in you, which I absolutely believe in you, and I heard the fine remarks from Mr. Buscaino, who's a champion for so many things in our city, why can't this go to like January 1st, 2025. So our team is just the same. We're not going through this if we're the advent of the Olympic Games are coming. What precludes us from going any longer?
I don't think there's anything that precludes it from happening. If that's the direction of the committee, then we can make that adjustment.
The city council, not a Libre CEO's office, city council and the mayor would have to approve it.
But if I had a amendment, it said that it'd be to effective. What does this end? What time of year does it end?
It's coterminous with the end of the fiscal year, so June 30, 2020.
So it'd be June 30, 2025, because that would be after the games, if that was the case. That's just a thought. I don't know what you think, Mr.
No, I think we should assess. I know next week the mayor's going to be in the Bay Area to make our final pitch for the 2024 games. But I think we should assess it after, see how well we fare.
Yeah,
Can we always bring this contract back?
Well, the only issue is that the contract expires this year, December 30th of this year. So if we could get something approved before then, and then maybe we can...
Will we go to council before council?
We're going to
We are
council tomorrow.
Hey, let's do it today.
But what you can always do a first amendment and
there you go.
amend the term.
All right, so why don't we do it right now? So when it goes to council, we say they amend the term to the 30th of, unless anyone objects to it. City attorney, you object to it at all?
No,
I'm just thinking, once we're in the hunt, whatever it is, you put your team together and you don't hesitate. You don't say in the third quarter you're going to change quarterbacks. You're going to keep going. And we're right at that point there where so much would be happening based on my experience. How old are you, Joe?
I just turned 40.
Just turned 40. So 30 years ago, when you were 10, I was around this building, and we were right in the advent of so many things with the great games. And I want you to be a champion for that, as you are for so many things.
Sure.
So if there's no objection, I'd like the terms to be extended to the 30th of June, 2025.
Right, you would just amend the recommendation.
Okay. On here, and it goes to council that way. Super.
Very good.
Okay.
Also, Patty, I want to commend you. I know one of my first meetings here at TCT was to call on LA Tourism Convention Board to promote the harbor area more. And I know you're sitting on the board at the of the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce. You're promoting both Crafted and our Waterfront and the Iowa. So please continue that push. And one of the agenda items today is going to seek alternative ways to improve our LA waterfront to make it a destination and a tourism hotspot. So thank you.
Well, and as you know, I think that there is a lot of synergy building down there now, particularly with the rebranding, calling it the LA Waterfront.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense from a marketing perspective for us, so we are trying to be as engaged as we possibly can.
Is San Pedro a brand name?
It is. The community down there, in terms of the attractions themselves, are gravitating towards LA Waterfront, just because generically it means more. It's still LA Waterfront at San Pedro,
Right.
but it brings in the Los Angeles name. Which
Just
is
like the LA Angels of Anaheim.
Yeah,
Or the
It's all marketing, right?
it is.
San Pedro Freeway, San Pedro. Okay. Thank you. All right, we're going to recommend that and send that recommendation to the, does the next committee hear this same report?
This item is also an Economic Development Committee later on this afternoon as well.
All right, so what about our amendment? Does that go from here to there?
We can
Yes,
amend-
well,
Yeah, mention it.
yes, what will happen is they will be considering our modifications that we made to amend the term to be extended to June 30th, 2025.
Right, just let's get through it. Okay,
Pat, I'd love to you sit and listen to item number 6 as well.
Okay, be happy.
Hopefully.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item
Very
number
good, Thank
two.
you. Next item.
Item number 2 is the issuance and sale of $1.6 billion in airport revenue bonds.
Madam CAO.
Natalie Brill at CEO's office. The Airport Commission and LA and LAWA have requested authority to issue $1.6 billion in bonds. They've asked for 3 different ways of doing this. The first is by negotiated sales with a team of underwriters, which include Morgan Stanley as the senior manager, with the co-manager, Cabrera, Loop Capital, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo, for between $450 million to $550 million. The second team would be made up of senior manager Siebert, Branford Schenck, with co-managers being J.P. Morgan, Citi, Stifel, and Ramirez. And the third transaction would be a direct loan. The city has done those also. That's usually chosen when it's a better interest rate than going to the primary market. It would be a direct loan or short-term debt, depending on the market. So these 3 transactions would allow the airport to issue $1.63 billion.
Got it. And those firms represent diversity as well?
Yes, they're very
Diversity
diverse.
that are the goals of the mayor and the city council and the city
Yes.
itself?
They're very diverse.
Mr. Buscaino?
Yeah, tell me the impact of these transactions and how these transactions, these moves benefit the overall operation of LAWA.
Sure. The
And what would happen if we don't approve this action?
Well, the 1.6
For
billion.
the record, state your name.
Yes, my name is Ryan Yakubik. I'm the CFO of Los Angeles World Airports. The transactions are doing a couple of things, broken out into effectively 3 pieces. $900 million of the request is for new money supporting terminal improvements in LAX's central terminal area. These are modernizing and effectively bringing up to a modern standard all of the existing terminals within the central terminal area. I'm sure you visited them and know that they need some additional work. The debt service from the bonds that are issued will be paid through the rates and fees of the users of the terminals, effectively the airlines. $200 million of the request is for refundings of existing bonds that are outstanding. Due to current market rates, there's an opportunity to refund those bonds for a savings. We always like to jump on those whenever we get the opportunity. The last $500 million is for a short-term construction vehicle. It could be a short-term loan. It could be a short-term direct loan or short-term financing. This is to support construction financing of the new midfield satellite concourse, which will add additional gates to the airport and effectively relieve congestion that's currently at the airport and hopefully increase the level of service to our passengers. That would be an interim financing during construction that would eventually be taken out by a longer-term financing. So all of this debt is effectively going to improve the airport as it exists today, and then that final piece is to enable the construction of additional gates at the airport that will allow us to accommodate additional aircraft.
This strategy is very similar to other strategies in other airports as well as the city. Take opportunities for refunding as well as short-term debt to decrease the overall cost.
Very good.
And we're going to hear this in council tomorrow
I don't know what it's scheduled.
before our recess?
Yes,
Yeah, this council,
before
Before the
this
recess.
will be heard on the 16th.
Before the recess, sure. Get the good rates. Okay.
Yep.
So ordered. We approve it.
Yes, no objection.
Next
And
item.
just for the, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we do have a CEO report that we will be considering that was passed out today.
Got it. We always do. Next item.
Item number 3 is the First Amendment to a contract with Gensler and Associates for on-call architectural and building services for the city's 3 airports. This extension is for 1 year only. It gives them time to issue the RFP and issue a permanent contract.
Madam CAO.
Andrea Mills, CAO office. Yes, as CLA stated, this is for an extension of 1 year. No additional funding is needed for the amendment.
Gensler's, this is there's no additional funding, as we said. It's about a $6 million contract. Gensler's been working on a number of very important projects for us.
How long has he been working out of the airport now?
Myself?
Gensler.
Yeah, Gensler. Gensler's been working, well, this is a 3-year contract, but they've done work off and on for us for a number of years before that. I don't know exactly when they started,
Yeah. But
this is a 3-year contract.
Very satisfactory firm.
Yes.
Excellent.
Very much so.
Any questions?
Good.
So ordered. Next item.
Item number 4 is similarly an amendment to a contract with Atkins North America, Inc. for engineering services at the airport.
Hi. CAO first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Buscaino. Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office.
Morning.
As the CLA stated, this is a request, the First Amendment, to extend an existing 3-year agreement for 2 years in order to allow the designer and the engineer of record for the second-level roadway expansion joint and deck repairs project at LAX to
You're
continue.
doing that right now?
They were doing,
Yeah,
yes.
very good,
It should
okay.
be concluded sometime in 2016. And it allows them to continue to provide post-design construction and construction administration services. For that reason, we recommend approval.
Good. Anything to add, gentlemen? Good. I approve it. Mr. Buscaino
Yes,
approves it.
move
So ordered.
approval, yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify for the record, we also have a CEO report that was handed out today
Thank
that
you.
we'll be
Always.
considering.
Always for the record. Thank you. So ordered. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 5 is the approval of the sale at auction of 2 single-family homes under the airport soundproofing programs. These homes are no longer needed, and they would be sold at auction, would be market rate.
Very good. Hey,
Bill Koenig, CAO's office. These are 2 residential properties that were acquired by the department for purposes of demonstrating the effectiveness of soundproofing in the Westchester and Englewood areas. As a result of this project, the department was able to mitigate noise issues in 7,300 units. That project is now completed. These parcels are no longer needed for that purpose, and it's proposed to sell them at public auction at the appraised value.
this is the, or better than the appraised value, right?
Pardon?
If it's an auction, it could be better than the
Minimum.
appraised value.
Minimum.
Minimum, yeah. This is a apartment house
These were a combination of apartment houses and single-family residences.
and single-family homes?
Were they all single?
There are 2 single-family homes.
The homes to be sold, Mark Adams, Lawa, the 2 homes to be sold are both single-family homes, one in CD11, one in CD8, that were acquired for the purpose of showing the technology, if you will, to the residents. But we insulated a good number of single-family and multifamily homes.
Right. It's a positive program.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Buscaino, any
Move to
questions?
approve.
Move to approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, state your names.
Cynthia Alexander, Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And
Thank you.
Mark Adams, thank you so much. All right. 6.
Item number 6 is continued
Hold that.
consideration of the motion by Mr. Buscaino relative to the ports of call redevelopment
Let's move on.
feasibility study, and there will be a verbal report by the
We're going to
CLA.
take that report in a minute, but let me finish these other items up right now so you can prepare for the next steps. 7.
Item number 7 is a second amendment to the permit with Pacific Maritime for additional parking spaces in Wilmington.
It's CO.
Hi, Alvin Newman, CAO's office. We concur with the summary by the CLA's office, and as was stated, this is a second amendment. It's as a result of a 32-year lease, and they're just doing this for additional parking.
You have a quick question about the bike.
Quick question for Mr. Buscaino.
Maybe for Rika, you know, Wilmington has, I think, the largest bike network in the city of Los Angeles. How does this proposal connect the network of bicycle paths described in the city's bicycle plan?
This one is located, this facility is located on the southwest corner of Alameda and Anaheim. So we are just postponing the construction of this until such time as the city is able to build that network. It's supposed to go from, San Pedro, Harbor Boulevard. We're constructing right now, planning for the Front Street improvements, and then we're going to be connecting it on Gibson and then across bridges on the northern side. And then it will connect to this area that is leased to PMA, but we still don't have a timeline for that. So this second amendment will change the time requirements such that we would give it back to PMA so that they could have an additional 190 parking spots. And when we are ready, we will take it back.
Okay. And as far as this, have we talked to our friends in the bike community of safety concerns on when you put bicycles next to heavy truck traffic? Is there any ongoing dialogue with those concerns?
I would have to report back on that. I'm
Okay.
not aware.
So again, we just need to, today's action, once approved, will extend the time frame to allow PMA, number one, to add parking slots at our new dispatch hall?
That's correct. It's the area that they have, it's slated for the bike paths, but since we're not ready to construct it, it will become parking spot. It will yield an additional 190 parking spots for now, and once we're ready, we will take that back and construct it into a bike path.
Is this on the property or is it on the street?
It is on the property that is leased to them, so
Okay.
it's separate
Okay.
from the street.
Thank you.
Thank you. When's this come to council?
This will also go before the, on the 16th,
On the
before
16th,
the recess.
you want to drive by and check it out, it's a good councilman that you are. If you
Very
have any
good.
more questions, let us know. Recommend approval. Thank you. Next item will be,
Item number 8. Item number 8 is a property exchange with Seahawk Development for various properties that are needed for the Wilmington Waterfront Development Project.
Mr. CAO.
Alvin Newman, CAO's office. We recommend approval as was stated. This is just an exchange of property, and it goes through the exchange of various leases and property, and they're using this primarily to just improve the situation for the Wilmington Waterfront Development Project.
Rika, thank you, Alan. How does this property fit into the Wilmington Waterfront Plan, and what's the proposed use for this property?
Okay. The property that the port is acquiring is part of the commercial area for the Wilmington Waterfront Development Project, which basically serves as a buffer between the community and the port's industrial area. Once we acquire that area, when we are ready to redevelop it, it would be part of the connectivity, from the Wilmington Waterfront Park to Banning's
Yes.
Landing, bring them to the water area. So it's
Good.
also part of the port's community and economic development goal.
Yeah, we've been talking about creating that sense of an entertainment district where you include dining and outdoor restaurants, and this is pretty much, is this at the mouth of Avalon?
This one is between Bridges and A Street, basically. So it's the first block south of Bridges.
Got it.
Harry Bridges?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is there a timeline on the plan for moving forward on the Wilmington Waterfront project?
I know that, this is one of the first steps, so it certainly would provide an impetus to moving it forward. Right now, I think I would have to get back to you on that.
That's fine. I met with, who was at our, just yesterday, one of your colleagues who was assigned, not Jack, maybe one of your colleagues who's assigned to look
Robles.
at property acquisitions. Yes, Ed.
Ed Robles.
Ed Robles, yes.
Yes, he is proceeding with that. He has an RFP that is soon to be released, and I think
Right.
there's over 11 entities that are interested in making a
fantastic.
proposal.
So, Mr. Chair, we talked about the LA waterfront and the connectivity between the San Pedro and Wilmington side, and there's so much potential at the mouth of Avalon, the core of the downtown Wilmington area corridor there, where, the opportunities are endless, where you can create that sense of place. You can bring in an entertainment, retail, dining experience in the Wilmington waterfront. We're really excited about moving forward on that.
Clean streets, safe streets.
Yes.
You know the senior lead down there? You know what a senior lead is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, good.
There's three of them.
And
Three
then
good ones.
the port has its function, but at the same time, there's nothing like water. And water inspires us. I truly believe if you looked at the DNA of Angelenos, it's because of the mountains that are behind us and the ocean that's out here. It gives us a taller feeling as a person. So
Move approval.
Move approval. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rico.
Thank you.
Okay,
All
we're
right, now we'll go back to number 6. If that's
back to number 6 for the verbal progress report from the CLA on the Ports of Call project.
He's respected. Well, it's a big issue right now.
Good morning, John Wickham with the Chief Legislative Analyst's Office. And the motion from the committee was to report back to the committee in 30 days with regard to a review of planning documents, various other studies related to the waterfront in the San Pedro area and other related matters. So we are in the process of conducting that review and summary, and we're making progress. We've gone back to documents back to 1995, which looks like a period when the real strong planning effort got going on the waterfront. And it seems like every year there's another study, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of thought in this area. I do want to comment that the Harbor Department has been extremely helpful in gathering all of this material and providing this information to our office. And we have some meetings coming up where we'll delve into some of these issues in a little more depth. Just a couple thoughts on what we've found so far, and this isn't, I don't know if this is all going to wind up in our final report, but just some of the concepts we've seen is in the big picture. There's a lot of work that's gone into the Bridge to Breakwater program, right? That's a significant effort. And there's a CEQA analysis. There's an EIR standing behind that now, and there has been some project on some of the components in that Bridge to Breakwater plan. It seems like it's very positive step forward, and you would want to continue to support that and help develop and build that plan out based on all of the work that's been done with the community, with the Harbor Department, with the city. So that's really a significant component that you have as a strength for what you're doing down there. I guess one of the concerns, or one of the thoughts, the issues that you need to consider is the long-term implementation and management of that plan. The Harbor Department is focused and specializes in cargo transport right now. This is a retail commercial development area. There are open space management issues. There's habitat restoration management issues. There's entertainment and programming issues. These are not the core strength of the Harbor Department. And so the question is, how do you make sure that there's long-term implementation and management for these things to continue to build them out and keep them strong? So that's one of the things that we're looking at, and we'll be talking to the Harbor Department about a little bit more. One of the key concepts that you see in all these reports going back to 1995 is the authenticity of the San Pedro community, the history of the San Pedro community, and what an important strength that is for this area. And how the things that need to be done there need to build on that authenticity. That's a critical component. Every single report that comes along hits on that in one way or another as a central theme for thinking about this area. So I wanted to bring that point out. With regard to ports of call specifically, I think some of the things that we're looking at there, and we'll be again talking to the Harbor Department about this, are finding ways to phase the implementation of that. To ensure that the city has the strongest position and the strongest options. The Harbor Department has the strongest options in moving forward with ideas that come forward for that area. Not to lock in too much at this point, so that you can be flexible and shift into something that comes along that's really helpful. I think one of the concerns is that there be some care and thoughtful consideration to the attraction or attractions that go into the site. One of the concerns is that if it's an attraction that brings in bus loads of kids, school children, to an attraction, those kids are going to have a great experience, but they are not going to be able to support the retail that will be built into the project. And so how do you build attractions, bring in attractions that are going to both bring people in and support the retail and support downtown San Pedro, right? So some very serious consideration needs to look at what that attraction or those attractions are. The pro forma report hit on that a little bit. And some other comments that have come in have suggested that maybe 2 or 3 smaller attractions may be more appropriate to help support the long-term health of any retail that comes in. And so that's really some care and consideration needs to go into how to deal with that and what is going to be the biggest help and health for the project. Some of the data shows that projects similar, there are a lot of projects similar to this. There's a lot of waterfront area in the Los Angeles area from Santa Monica all the way down to Orange County. People have a lot of choices. And a lot of these projects have very high vacancy rates in their retail areas. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to build something that is going to have a lot of vacancy. You're not getting any progress, right? So
how do you overcome that?
What's that?
How would you overcome that?
Those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at. But I think this one key issue is be careful about the attractions that you put in, mm-hmm. right? So that you're not bringing in people who won't be supporting the attractions. Supporting the retail, put in attractions that will build, right? Mm-hmm. Another way to deal with that is, again, this authenticity of San Pedro and the history of San Pedro. That's something that nobody else has. So if you build it for San Pedro and you build it about San Pedro, that's something that doesn't exist in Orange County. It doesn't exist in Santa Monica. And it creates something more that people will want to come and experience. Mm-hmm. Right? So that authenticity question is really very significant in the long-term health of the project. Mm-hmm. Right? And then, okay, so those are some of the thoughts on the ports of call piece. And then it seems like there might be some additional needs in terms of studies or review that might need to be conducted. And maybe the Harbor Department has some other studies on this, or some other organizations do. There seems to be some additional need for transportation and circulation studies. It takes an hour by public transit to go from downtown Long Beach to downtown San Pedro. It's a 12-minute drive. So there needs to be some, Mr. Lavange mentioned the water taxis, and that the water taxi concept came up again. There need to be some other ways to look at that and deal with that. And then within the district, you want to be able to get people from the SS Iowa to Ports of Call to the Maritime Museum down to the Cabrillo Museum. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to connect all of these things. And
Manning's Landing as well.
Yeah. And so how do you do that? And
Shoreline Village, even including Long Beach.
Yeah. So how do you do that, and what are the resources? What are the best ideas and concepts to get you there? I don't know if those studies have been done. That might be a gap in the work that would be helpful to fill. There's been a significant investment in this area between Ports of Call and Crafted, but there seem to be gaps in there. You may want to, rather than plugging in lots of projects along the 8.5-mile waterfront area, make sure that you focus on that area first, fill that in so that you are supporting all of those activities and businesses, Crafted, All to See, Ports of Call, so that they build the strength and then you can build out from there. Right. If you plug in things randomly throughout the district, you may not build the synergy that you need.
Sure.
So there's some questions in looking at that. The infrastructure question has to be answered. That's critical to what's happening down here. How are you going to build the infrastructure? And that's some of the remaining questions in the motion that we're trying to look at. And then it might be helpful to have a deeper dive into this question of the history and authenticity of San Pedro and how to bring that forward in the development of all of this area. It's clearly a critical point for anybody who has looked at this community, but there hasn't been a lot of depth in what they've actually pointed out on that. So those are some of the findings we have so far. We will have some recommendations when the report comes forward to you next month. And if you have any questions.
Thanks, John. Thank you so much for your report. There's not a day that does not go by where me and my team talk about waterfront redevelopment and doing our best to seek the best and highest use of this development from San Pedro to Wilmington. In today's California section of the LA Times, oftentimes I talk about waterfronts around the country. Clearly in San Diego, the front page of the California section, a leisurely phase, pedestrian-friendly waterfront makeover. we've made some significant strides with our promenade, our bridge to breakwater program, but we're just not there yet, and we need to do more. And this is why we called for the CLA who's been involved in major developments in the city of Los Angeles, from Hollywood and Highland to LA Live. And I think we are just destined and next to strike to be the next tourist attraction in the city of Los Angeles. Even more so where you see property values declining the closer you get to the water. As far as your sources of information you used in your research, are you going back on a number of the EIRs, ULI studies, is that what you used?
All of that, yeah.
Has there been any outreach to the development community?
Not yet. That hasn't been part of the review.
And we have Mike Galvin here representing the Port of Los Angeles. Mike, if you can join us. I believe the input from the development community in building large-scale economic development projects in the city of LA is so important. And we need to decide how do we move forward. And I'd like to ask CLA to reach out to the development community and ask for their input. Mike, in 2009, the port approved the EIR for the Port Call.
For the San Pedro Waterfront, which includes Port Sakal.
And it's been entitled, ready to move on that, right?
Correct.
Some of the challenges that, share with us some of the challenges that you've seen since 2009, since the approval of that EIR, and here we are sitting approaching 2015, and still not one shovel on the ground at Port Sakal.
Some of the challenges are general economic challenges that we've seen in the economy. You know, coming out of 2009, it wasn't the greatest economy to test the waters on. On top of that, we experienced some direct challenges on the development pads that are down in the Outer Harbor Marina area, where we put out an RFP and were not successful at all in receiving any proposals. And so at that time, we repositioned ourselves and went off in a different way and tried to build a different strategy than we had done in the past, which was to issue RFPs and hope that some would come in. And so what we did was we reached out to the development community. We hired an internal consultant to determine a strategy to move forward, which was building on all the strategic points of the waterfront, with Port Sakal being the jewel of it, and really try to build critical mass around that by bringing in events and marketing and other things to the waterfront, and really aggressively pursuing the development community to bring them down to the waterfront and to get them accustomed with what was going on, and then to get the business around the waterfront built as well through the events program. And so we did that so that we could get a better response out of a Port Sakal RFP process. And that's why that took a little bit of time in 2009, building up into the RFQ that eventually went out in 2012. And so that's what took that time. Some of it was economic. It wasn't a good time in 2009 to do that, period, and we understood that. We also had an issue with another RFP, and we had to build the strategy. And so those things took time, got us to where we needed to be, and we did get a very good response in comparison to past efforts with RFPs and RFQs for the Port Sakal and for other sites.
So EIR is approved in 2009, RFQ goes out in 2012.
Right.
A selection's been named with the Rakovich team, and yet here we are 2 years later, still not one shovel on the ground. Why the issue?
The negotiations have been difficult to some extent. Some of that has been turnover internally. Some of that has been the economics of the port as well, and having to reposition where we have been. We've gone in through a major transition in the last 10 years from a port that was growing 10% year over year to a port that has been growing at a very, very smaller rate since then. And so coming out of 2008 as well, we had the same difficulties in our general business, and I think we had to reposition how we were going to work this forward and come up with a much more predictable and sustainable plan. That was faced with some challenges because of changes within the administration. That has settled down now. We have a new executive director, have had Gene in place for 6 months, and I think on Thursday we'll be coming forward with a major piece of our strategy and commitment to the waterfront, which is a public access funding policy that will allocate Harbor Department funds in a predictable and sustainable way going forward for the next 10 years. And so we are now where we need to be. We have a strategy for long-term funding, both for San Pedro and for Wilmington. And I believe that things will be expedited going forward because this is the big piece of the puzzle that was missing.
So you've been involved how long in this project, Mike?
I've personally been involved since late 2013 is when I came onto the Ports Call project.
And you're comfortable, you're confident that this policy that's going to be presented before the commission on Thursday, we will have those dollars dedicated to the infrastructure to move forward on waterfront redevelopment?
Yes, we will.
I think we need to look at...
Mr. I want you to take over the meeting.
Okay.
I got to go down to my office on something. This is a report, but I just want to mention two things. One, when I was at Water and Power, they had several properties, and you'd always argue that it's not their core business. And so how do you do it? And I spoke of nature preserve because there's a certain value to nature preserve for everybody. I don't know what the value is, but I'm sure there's other ports in the world that have the same problem that you have to articulate. In San Diego, the other thing too, which is they moved the convention center down there, but it's a different city than we have here, and they had the light rail, but also they had the gas lamp district. And I remember, you're too young to remember Beacon Street, but it was a pretty tough street. Mm-hmm. And to try to recreate Beacon Street, I could say that to him because we love each other. He's too young, I'm kidding you, Joe. I won't do it anymore because you didn't laugh like you used to. So anyway, the point being that has to be filled in. But if you get people the water, they want to be near the water. I mean, that's the whole key that it is. And I would suggest, and I would support, if the port funded, if there was a day trip to Pier 39, because 39 was a nothing. Yep. And now it's the hottest spot up in San Francisco. Go to San Francisco, look what they did in some parts of Oakland, or you can go down to San Diego, and your community leaders. And I think my friend Jamie Wilson, is he for or against this?
He too, I believe, seeks the best use for the waterfront.
Best use, that means get people to the water.
I think with our current existing tenants that only see a weekend crowd, I'm sure they would like to see a crowd in their restaurants every day of the week.
It can happen.
You can go right now at 9:30 in the morning. There's 20 souls along our waterfront, which is a crime and a punishment.
Right. And I also think it's fascinating to see the work of the port. As a child growing up here from a big family, much of our entertainment was in the city, and our father would take us down to the port where the pier, where the ferry boat was, and we'd cross over and we'd look at the ships. And I know there was more physical longshoremen there than there are now because it's containerized, but there's a thing to see, and people want to see real. And I think what you did from the bridge and I was down there in at the big event that you had this summer, and all the families came down where the water is there and the music and all that. So you just got to continue it.
But your comment, Mr. Labange, you mentioned that, we, compared to other waterfronts around the country, our downtown is not next to the waterfront.
Right.
But we need to create a downtown in the harbor area.
You got to walk
where you have live-work lofts, you have disposable income. Obviously, with Alta Sea, that's going to be an added investment where you're going to have incubator, marine research folks that are going to need to live in the area, and they wouldn't have to take a car downtown to go to work.
Right.
And, with the major changes taking place in the port industry, as you mentioned, John and Mike, with fewer public dollars available for infrastructure, we need to be creative. And I think the devil's in the details, right? And this proposed, and I know you have to go, Mr. Labange.
I do, but also I just put pressure on all of us to say, look, let's have this every 3 months. Every 3 months, there's something in this committee on this issue.
How about every month?
Well, you can do it every month, but sometimes you need every 2 months. Whatever you want, because there's some goals that you got to get to and try to create this. And there's some fantastic ideas in the world that have been duplicated, that have taken vacant urban industrial space and created into what people want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Any public comment cards? Any general? No. Okay. Question going back to public financing. John, have you looked at our other projects when that have been successful, grant opportunities, public financing mechanisms, and public-private partnerships that have been successful in the city? And can these types of financing mechanisms be used for our LA waterfront?
Well, we're still looking at some of the details on that, and we're working with the EWDD, Economic Workforce Development Department, to identify some of those. With the loss of the redevelopment agency, a lot of those tools are gone. We still have it's called the Big If policy That's the economic development tool we've been using on a number of projects, where 50% of the tax increment revenue that's generated by a project is provided to support the expansion, the development of that project. There's a city policy on how to implement that, how the kind of analysis that goes into it, the kind of revenues that might be available. It's just a question of seeing how it would apply in this particular project, if it would qualify and how it would go in there. So there's some details that need to be worked out.
One of the challenges is dealing with state tidelands restrictions as well when it comes to financing. Is that the case, Mike?
In regards to what John was mentioning regarding tax increment, I don't think, I'm not aware of any limitation for us participating in that sort of financial setup, whether it be the developer or the port themselves, because the port essentially is part of the developer in this public-private partnership. State tidelands comes more into effect with land use restrictions regarding residential uses and other types of uses that are more local oriented and not regionally oriented, and so that's where state tidelands gets involved.
And kind of to offset the port's concerns about dedicating dollars, John, give me your thoughts, and based on your experience, are there any ways that we can bring in private investment dollars for this waterfront development?
That's what you're doing with the RFQ for the Ports of Call development. That's how you go about bringing in those private dollars in the development side. If
obviously 2 years into it, I think the reason why we had an RFQ is because one of the main requirements was having the developer bring in private dollars, and yet here we are 2 years into it.
Yeah, remember for example, the Grand Avenue project was started, I don't know how long ago, and that came to a culmination in 2008. And then the economy tanked, and here they are. They're still trying to get parts of that Granite Avenue project going. They've done 2 of the components out of the 4. So there has been incremental progress in that project. But the big core of that, big major downtown project, extensive RFP process, major national developer that's bringing resources into it, and it's taking a long time to get there. These are very complicated, complex projects. The financing is, you have to have all of that right in line from the developer, any public agency participation, the banks, and who are going to be financing these things, and they do take time. Yep. They do take a fair amount of time, and
that's one thing I struggle with is patience around here, gentlemen. I'll tell you right now, I'm just leading with a sense of urgency on this issue, and because it's my number one priority, and I know you know. We want to move forward on this.
Another example is the Blossom Plaza project in Chinatown, right? Perfect place for a mixed-use development, right on a train, Gold Line train station. The concept for the project was introduced by Gloria Molina when she was a city council member.
Jeez.
It started construction a year and a half ago.
My goodness.
So, some of these are great ideas, and the complexities that appear in some of these projects.
And Patty can attest to this. We visited our sister river in South Korea, and this was a waterway that was created, and around that waterway is this economic hub of retail, commercial, hotel, residential. And they just built a waterway that recycles water from the river, and we're just saying water brings prosperity. And if we talk about around the city of Los Angeles, the $1 billion with the B, $1 billion plan to revitalize our LA River. I'm looking to bring that same attention and those same dollars to the St. Peter Wilmington waterfront. We hear my colleagues, Mitch O'Farrell, Bob Blumenfield, have directed the CLA, the Bureau of Engineering, Economic and Workforce Development Department, to look at recent legislation relating to enhanced infrastructure finance districts, IFDs, to assist with revitalizing the LA River. Could this legislation be used to assist our efforts along the waterfront?
So, with regard to IFDs, there have been numerous proposals that have been legislative proposals that have been introduced. And in Sacramento, there has been a certain reluctance between the legislature and the governor to enact any changes to the IFD structure until the Community Redevelopment Agency wind down has been completed. There is some concern that the IFDs will evolve into a new redevelopment agency type approach. From a city perspective, that's a good thing. But at the state level, they are concerned about going down that path right now. We have a new biennial session beginning. Well, it's already begun. They've already been sworn in. They will be starting to introduce and consider new legislation beginning in January.
Right.
So that is an opportunity for the city to suggest some ideas on how to...
So what's the time frame at introducing bills? January, February?
January is the deadline to request that new bills be
January 1st?
I'd have to look at the calendar. It's a Friday in January.
Okay.
And then the bills need to be introduced by the end of February. So there are two deadlines coming up. And so that would be one vehicle to affect to try and affect and work on the IFD legislation to create more opportunity for the city.
As far as the site-specific tax revenues go, can you provide an overview on these site-specific tax revenues and how private investment can be used to generate additional funding streams to assist with financing public infrastructure?
Well, that will be explored in depth in the report that we're bringing forward. In short, the idea is that up to 50% of the net new revenue generated by the project would be available to the project if it's clear that there is a gap in the financing for the project.
Any state Thailand's issues with that, Mike?
I'd have to defer to city attorney to discuss that. I'm not aware of any myself, but it's a legal issue.
You're shaking your head, John.
Those are city general fund revenues.
Okay, got it.
So the city council and the mayor can decide how to allocate the general fund revenues. They are property tax, sales tax, business tax, transient occupancy tax. There are 6 or 7, documented transfer tax, 6 or 7 that go into it. And it's limited to the project area itself, whatever is net new generated by that project. So, for example, the project now generates a certain amount of city general fund revenue that is subtracted out of the estimate of how much the new project would generate, and then it's 50% of what the net new is then potentially available.
Got it.
So that's the quick shorthand of how this is done.
There's some potential there.
And typically the restriction that you're referring to is going the other way. It's going from funds from the port going towards the city
going
general
into
fund.
the project.
Funds are coming the reverse way. I am not personally aware, but we'll check with the city attorney.
And so what goes into the project affects the revenues that are available, right? So on some of the projects that the city has supported, they've been hotels, and TOT is a significant generator of revenue for the general fund, right?
Obviously, the item that we approved earlier.
Yeah, it's all related. That's why tourism has been such a strong focus for the city.
Right.
There's depending on the property that's involved, there could be a significant amount of new property tax that can be generated by a project.
Absolutely.
Sales tax is more marginal as a revenue stream. And on a project like this, again, this comes back to what are you building in there? If you're building more retail, that's great, but you have to be able to fill the retail spaces. If you're building a big attraction, there's going to be no sales tax revenue generated by the attraction.
I think the port identifies, if you go back to the history of the Bridge to Breakwater, when we broke ground at the northern end of the Bridge to Breakwater development, you brought in the new promenade, the fanfare fountains, and all of a sudden you start seeing the bank lofts rise and the view in downtown San Pedro, which ultimately benefits the city. And can you imagine if we create this transformative project here, how it's going to benefit the region, not only San Pedro. You mentioned San Pedro, Wilmington. This is a project that's going to benefit the entire state, people who visit us.
And that is not part of the calculation for net new revenue through the Big If policy.
I think it ought to be.
Only, because again,
right,
you remember every...
Dave Roberts, my planning guy.
Every project's going to be saying the same thing, right?
But it needs to be included.
Every project is going to make the same claim. And the further out from that project you get, the analysis for what the net new revenue impact is very much more difficult. You know, an economist will tell you we're just not going to be able, it's going to be a guess. And so the whole idea of this policy that was adopted by the council is to really focus it on this specific project. This we can understand. This we know what's going to happen. It's questionable what the impacts are beyond that. We really can't analyze it. Our sense is that it's going to be positive. But to put an actual number on that, it's just the economists that we've worked with, you really don't want to go.
But John, you don't have to go far to come to downtown Los Angeles. And the story I shared till I'm blue in the face is on Francisco Street as a young police officer arresting drug addicts, gangsters, prostitutes. And what's on Francisco Street today, once a high crime area, you have the LA Live development.
Yep.
And you have cranes today in downtown, high-rise condos. But what downtown doesn't have, that we have, is the water line, the Pacific Ocean, Catalina, the main channel, the grand channel of them all, right? So going back to the port, the port knows the importance of this development moving forward. That's going to benefit the area, the region, and our tourism dollars. I mean, when I was in Asia, we had a few events to promote tourism, and as much as the LA Tourism Board did a great job of promoting the Iowa, had pictures and videos of our LA waterfront, the LA waterfront wasn't even in the mayor's talking points to bring people to visit our waterfront. It's a travesty. I mean, we know our neighbors in China and South Korea and Japan are visiting us, yet they're being directed to Hollywood and Highland, to LA Live, which is great. We need to support our local economy. But nowhere was the LA waterfront in the mayor's talking points in promoting tourism. And I get it. I know why. Because we haven't created that there. And doggone it, as long as I'm here, we're going to continue to push to make this project a success and to see it come to fruition. Are there, John, any other lessons learned from other large economic development projects in the city like LA Live, Hollywood and Highland that, can you tell us about how hotel subvention agreements have been used in downtown?
Again, we're using the Big If policy, the 50% of net new revenue in support
That's
for
what
the development of those.
You're referring to that, I see.
Yeah, so that's the tool that we've used to support those.
And then looking at other alternative financing mechanisms that have been used to fund public infrastructure, what are some of those alternative financing mechanisms that you've seen around LA and the state?
Yeah, we'll be looking at the opportunities, again, talking to EWDD on that.
And lastly, you mentioned how earlier the port, their main focus is moving cargo. Absolutely, we all embrace that. And they, maybe aside from Mike, who's been a champion for this project for years, and others around the port. I see Rika here as well. The port lacks the skills and knowledge, the ability of retail, commercial development, entertainment along this water line. In your report, you recommended 4 items on how the Harbor Department should be organized.
No, we haven't issued a report yet.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So we're still trying to formulate some of the concepts.
When can we see that report?
That will be available for the next meeting at TCT.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so it'll be in advance for that.
Very good. Well, we're all anxious to see how ways that we can encourage the port to move forward on this. Even I know we're taking steps, but I'm saying baby steps. We need to full throttle on this. I'm only here 10 years, guys. I don't want to talk about this 10 years from now sitting in this committee. I want to see something that's going to be transformative along our Wilmington, St. Peter waterfronts. Yeah. Mike, any closing thoughts?
Just to reaffirm that we are committed, as you are, and I think you hit on a couple really important points that it's, and so did John, these projects are difficult and they require collective forces to get together and to align and to build strength to move it forward. And if we're all together on the same page, we can make a success out of it. If we're not, it's more difficult. So it is very important for us all to get on the same page and to move forward. And I think this process is getting us there. Good. I think the funding process will get us there from a financial point of view. And I think very soon here we'll all be on the same page and we'll be able to committed move forward in a very quick fashion.
Very good. I think with this policy that's going to be before the commission on Thursday, the big ticket item is trust. And aside from not seeing assurances on waterfront redevelopment, I mean, there's been a lack of trust in this issue with the port and the community and the development community, who we all respect and continue to the development community say it's not going to happen. Oh, we keep talking about ports of call, but it's not going to happen. But to see the commitment from the port on the infrastructure dollars that we haven't seen since I've been here, it goes back to, the port saying one thing, but we want to see the dollars committed. And very similar to Altacy, where you commit the infrastructure dollars, tie it to a lease, we know that's going to happen. And that's why Altacy is not part of this policy that's going to be presented before the commission on Thursday. So we're anxious, I'm anxious to see the details and see how the commission's going to respond to the proposal come Thursday. Mike, tell me about the Cabrillo Marina Way. Are we sitting on that? We want to wait to see what happens with Ports of Call. Is that my understanding?
Part of the strategy is that Ports of Call is our most valuable asset in regards to waterfront redevelopment, and we can build value off of Ports of Call. So the intent is to get Ports of Call squared away and moving forward, and then once we get that done, then we will move on to other sites where value has been built as a result of the Ports of Call development. I believe the commitment that we're making towards the waterfront generally will also assist in that. To your point, the development community will understand that there is a predictable manner in which the port will continue to fund waterfront redevelopment. The numbers that you mentioned, $1 billion for the LA River, when you look over the past 10 years, the port has put about $600 million
right.
into waterfront redevelopment. Right. And over the next 10 years, with the proposal that's going forward, it's more or less about $40 million a year or another $400 million. And so you're getting there. You'll see that $1 billion commitment. And I believe the development community will see that, and hopefully fruits will bear out of Ports of Call, and we will build some strength and be able to offer up other sites.
Specifically with the Cabrillo Marina Way, I envision hotel, residential, retail on the bottom. Tell me about the residential piece. Can we allow residential? I know we need an exemption from state, the legislature. Tell me about those steps moving forward.
It's the same issues that are everywhere where we are on entitlement property. There are restrictions for residential uses, and I believe your office has done some work on that, and as well as our office. So there's been a significant amount of resources spent, which we will discuss more with the CLA's office this week, on exploring how we can do residential on the waterfront. And it has been a very difficult process to go through for the port because we have not found a lot of options. And so the same restrictions apply to those properties as well, and the same obstacles are there. And so we would have to continue to
Gosh, that Cabrillo Marina Way is ripe. It's just ripe for development there. Very similar to what we see at Marina del Rey. I mean, beautiful infrastructure that's been committed by the port there. Nice promenade overlooking the marina. That's great potential there.
And I think at the same time that there are significant opportunities outside the tidelands which are potentially more financially feasible to develop from residential perspective, provide better viewpoints, are not encumbered by leases. And so
we're doing our part on that.
From the port's perspective, we would like to really, and that's about building this collective thought process around this and making sure that we're all on the same page, is that there seem to be many opportunities there that could really bolster what we're doing. And if we can connect those opportunities with what we have on the commercial side, I think we can get to the same place without running through potential obstacles with the California State Tidelands Trust.
Got it. John, thanks, Mike, for that. John, you mentioned about a partnership with EWDD.
Yes.
What does that entail?
Actually, your instruction last month was that
legally, can we do that with the port? Do we need an RFP? I mean, this is a city entity, right?
Well, we haven't gotten that far. Your instruction originally was that we consult with the Harbor Department and EWDD in our review. And so that's what we're doing at the moment.
Very good.
So whether there are any instructions for EWDD that come out of this
Again,
process.
going back to having that skills, knowledgeability in making these deals work, EWD is very credible to do that. Mike, you want to pitch in on that?
We have meetings scheduled this Thursday, both with CLA's office, your office is involved in some of the meetings as well, and EWDD, to talk about past efforts on the residential side, as well as to talk about the current lease going forward and to pool their internal knowledge on that. And so as a city department, we can tap into that knowledge base, and they may also have resources outside that we can tap into indirectly as well.
And I want to commend Ms. Perry, the general manager of the department, who brought in Jenny Scallon, who knows the area well when she once worked for CRA, and I know that she's part of those discussions.
Yeah.
Okay. When's our next TCT meeting?
Our next meeting is going to be held. It's scheduled for January 13th.
So, John, will expect a report on January 13th.
Yes.
We're revisiting this.
In advance of January.
Actually, before that. Okay,
Yes.
great. Thanks, John, for your hard work. Mike, thank you so much for your passion and dedication making this thing work. Okay, with that,
what are we going to do with this item?
We're going to
continue it
until January 13th. Thanks, Michael.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us, and have a great holiday. I think we'll see you and a great New Year celebration. Thanks, Patty, for joining us. We're going to do great work.